Hey everybody, welcome to some more reveals. This time it is Paladin. And boy have they got a smorgasbord of... spoilers for what is coming ahead. They don't really have a theme, it is just cards, so... bear with it, but there are some gems in there. A lot of the discourse on Discord right now, where the reveals have just come through, are like, this is terrible, this is all awful. I think there are some hidden gems in here though, but it's not a predefined archetype. So the early reveals were on these two cards. Tigress Plushie, which is like a mini Ziliax, right? A 3-mana 3/2 beast with miniaturize, so when you play you get a 1-mana 1/1 version of it. And it has Rush, Lifesteal, Divine Shield. So the only thing that is missing from Ziliax, which was a 5-mana card by the way, is it doesn't have Magnetic and it doesn't have Taunt. Pretty good trade, honestly, right? This is a solid little minion, a solid little dude that will go into your mid-range Paladin deck. Ooh boy, mid-range Paladin. Also, we got shown Toy Captain Tarim, 5-mana 3/7, another miniaturized minion. Taunt, Battlecry. Set a minion's attack and health to this minion's. Again, it screams like vaguely control, it screams mid-range. So I was kind of thinking going into this, expect some mid-range enablers. And there are a few of those cards that do this, but there's also cards that do a lot of weird other stuff. Anyway, first and foremost, let me go back to more of this mid-range Paladin. Crafter's Aura, 7-mana holy spell. At the end of your turn, summon a random 6-cost minion. It lasts for 3 turns. That's pretty powerful just on first glances. You're getting effectively 18 mana, right? Assuming you live through the 3 turns the aura is up. You're going to get 3 6-cost cards, that's 18 mana. For 7 mana. Now, obviously, it's not all quite made equally, because you're paying 7 mana to, lose basically value on the first turn. But then every subsequent turn after that, you, reap the value back again. And we have seen cards like this before in the past. Frostwolf's Kennels and Wildpaw Cavern, they were both cheaper spells, which have this very similar aura effect. They lasted 3 turns, and they summoned a relatively cheap minion. For Frostwolf's Kennel, it was a 2/2 with Stealth. This was a 3-mana spell. So you could say in total it summoned 6/6 Stealth of stats. I'd kind of value that at about 6 mana, so you'd say, you spend 3 mana to get 6 mana out of it at the end. This card saw a little bit of play, but not too much. So this is kind of like my ballpark. If it's just double the value you get from the card, it's not worth it. It's too slow. It's too drawn out the value. Crafter's Aura, though, you're getting 18 mana, and it's 7, so, maybe there is a space for this. Wildpaw Caverns, on the other hand, which was probably one of the main cards from this last 3 turns effects. They saw a lot of play in the Evolve Shaman list, the Freeze of Avalanche one, which was pretty strong, honestly. That gave you 3/4 elementals that freezes. I'd equate this to about a 3-mana minion. You got 3 of them. 3 times 3 is 9, so... 4 mana for 9 mana worth of stuff. So I think the Crafter's Aura is ballpark. This is generating enough stuff for it to be good. Again, it's kind of hard to extrapolate from this. The Wildpaw Cavern, is a 4-mana thing that's giving out 9. This is 7 that gives out 18. If you double it to show it's, just do the ratio. The ratio I think on the aura works out slightly better, but it's kind of ballpark a Wildpaw Cavern. Now, where it sort of potentially falls apart is if you go through the 6-cost pool of minions right now. Unironically, Balderfist Ogre may be one of the better gets. So many of the 6-mana minions right now in the game have battle cries on them. And typically when a minion has battle cries, it's understated, right? You get an effect from playing the card, and they take away, because of that effect, some stat line. So Balderfist Ogre, unironically, because again, this is the end of the turn, so even if your minion had Rush or something like that, that's not helpful. You're really looking for things with aura-like effects and Death Rattles and Taunts. And even Death Rattles are still a little bit slow, right? So yeah, Balderfist Ogre, and then obviously raw stats is the other thing. So Balderfist Ogre may be one of the better gets. I was also looking through the random 6 costs. I think Testing Dummy might be the best thing you can get right now. Again, just bearing in mind through the rotation of the core set and the removal of minions from I can't remember what the set was now, but you know, the Nathria, March of the Lich King, Sunken City expansions. So yeah, if you could use your Crafter's Aura, if you could guarantee generate like 3 testing dummies, then sure, it's fine. But if you go through the list, as I said, it is a little bit spooky, so I'm not sure this card is going to be good enough. It definitely seems to be intended for this mid-range Paladin deck, and I just think there are going to be better cards still, despite the rotations, than Crafter's Aura. However, if that is not true, we have a tutor for it. Trinket Artist, 3 mana 2/3, Battlecry, draw a Divine Shield minion and an Aura. Alright, a lot of people, again, have been poo-pooing the Paladin cards, and I want to just say this Trinket Artist is it's a really good card, right? It's effectively a 2 mana minion. But for that 1 additional overpay on the mana cost, you get to draw 2 cards, assuming you have both a Divine Shield minion and an Aura in your deck. And obviously you would stack your deck to have many Auras and many Divine Shield minions. And there's a lot of good Divine Shield minions in the game right now. The Origami Dragon, which again would slot into this mid-range value Paladin deck. You could shoot it out with Trinket Artist. That's a really great draw, honestly. You can obviously, again, I keep saying this, you can set your Ziliax Deluxe to basically have whatever you want on it as the bonus decks. Therefore, any card that tutors for something with a bonus effect can tutor for Ziliax as well. So you can generate your Ziliax as long as you put Perfect Module on it. Trinket Artist may be able to pull it out of your deck. You could also do High-Hold Silverwing. High-Hold Silverwing would be a tutor for a Holy Spell, so you could tutor for a High-Hold Silverwing, which tutor for a Holy Spell. Yeah, that is, you know, that's a card that sees a lot of play anyway. And then Living Horizon as well. If this is going to be your hand Paladin, maybe because clearly they tried to push hand Paladin in the showdown, and it didn't really come to fruition. Play Trinket Artist. You have 9 cards in hand at that point. You get a Living Horizon, and you can just slot that thing onto the board, maybe, if you've got, an additional 2 mana right you'd need for it. So at turn 5, you could play this 3 mana 2/3. You could play Living Horizon, and you would draw a card. That's pretty good. That's pretty good value. Problems, mid-range decks typically aren't doing particularly well right now, so wave hands. It seems very fair is what I'll say about Paladin. Okay, here's an interesting card. Cardboard Golem. 4 mana 4/4 Battlecry. Increase the duration of auras in your hand, deck, and battlefield by 1. Okay, what auras does Paladin have? They have Inventor's Aura. It sees 0 play. They have Resistance Aura, sees 0 play. They have Deputization Aura that sees play, and they have Crusader's Aura that sees play, and they will have Crafter's Aura, obviously, when this set comes out. Now, here is the problem. Crusader's Aura sees a lot of play in token aggro decks. Cardboard Golem is a value card, and increasing the duration of your aura is more of a long-range, value effect. Aggro doesn't give a shit about that, so it's really not that good with Crusader Aura. Deputization Aura, therefore, is probably the big hit for this. That does see play in these mid-rangier decks, like the Earthen Paladin decks, I think are running Deputization Aura still. They're not doing particularly well, but they are running it. Crafter's Aura would obviously be the other good choice for this. If you can make it last for 4 turns and you get 24 mana worth of stats from it, invariably, even if you low roll some of them, that is going to be good enough value. And bearing in mind this is an epic card as well, so you could conceivably roll 2 of them, you could bounce them back as well to go even longer. And you could get this Crafter's Aura going, for 5 or 6 turns. That's good, right? Right? That's value. No, I think this is too fair. I think it is simply too fair. There's not enough mechs to justify Inventor's Aura, where conceivably, again, the additional turn for more value could be good. I think Resistance Aura is just generally too bad as a card. But maybe there will be some obnoxious deck that bounces this back multiple times and it just makes Resistance Aura cost so much more. Because currently, having seen the Druid release, a lot of people are theory crafting these OTK spell decks. So maybe you'll need a deck that can counter the OTK spell decks that are discounting their minions, they're discounting their spells. And maybe this is the deck. Maybe you throw in a very, very fair mid-range Paladin deck. You throw in your Cardboard Golem, you put a Resistance Aura in there. You throw in some Crafter's Auras. By the way, you could just fill your deck with auras. It's not just a single aura. You're hitting all of them. Do I think it's a good idea to run, 4 of these auras in your deck? Probably not. So this is going to be a bit of a watch out in the future card. I can see a world where I would run it in a Highlander deck, possibly with Deputization Aura, Crafter's Aura, and Resistance Aura, but that is a stretch. That's a real stretch. So yeah, I just don't see it right now. I don't think Crafter's Aura is good enough to buff long term, and I think this is the big card you want to get buffed. I think it's too easy to play around anyway. This could almost last like, indefinitely. And I think a lot of decks that I'm picturing right now, we've not seen the full package yet, could deal with this. So yeah, I'm sorry, Cardboard Golem, I just don't. I like you, but I don't see you. Fancy Packaging, 1 mana spell. Give a minion with Divine Shield +2/+3. This is just good, right? You can't argue with this just being good. A lot of Paladin minions have Divine Shield. Obviously, the decks will be full of minions with Divine Shield, and this is 1 mana, give a minion 2/3. It's pretty boring, pretty standard, but it's really good, and if you're running one of these token aggro decks, I can definitely see you throwing a Fancy Packaging in there to, you play your 1 mana... Actually, I was going to say, you play your 1 mana 1/1 Divine Shield, you probably wouldn't. On turn 2, sometimes you get this 1 mana 1/1 Divine Shield, and you throw a Fancy Packaging on it just to bulk it up again, to make it more like a 3-cost minion at that point. So yeah, I think this will see play again, but it's so jarring compared to like some of the other cards we've been shown. So yeah, it's very solid. Just as a reminder, Lady Liadrin is also rotating back into the core set, so you could conceivably get back these Fancy Packagings. And also, Shroomskivate is still in the game, because it was only just added to the game. And that gives a minion Divine Shield, so you can put this Fancy Packaging onto any minion, as long as you play Shroomskivate first. And also, Lady Liadrin could pull back Shroomskivate, so you get the combo here, right? I think, personally, that is going to be too slow. I do think Fancy Packaging and Shroomskivate will go into the same deck. It'll be some sort of aggro tokeny Paladin deck, and a decent number of minions will have Divine Shield in it, of course. So, Fancy Packaging will go into some of the early cards, or it'll be added as a finisher to Shroomskivate. Another card I can see seeing play is Painter's Virtue. 4 mana 2/3 weapon, lifesteal. After your hero attacks, give minions in your hand +1/+1. Hand buff Paladin is probably the most classic Paladin archetype. It doesn't surprise me that they are supporting it. What actually surprised me is they're supporting it so little. So this kind of reminds me of these two cards. Prismatic Jewel Kit was the weapon that gave you your minions +1/+1 after they were losing Divine Shield. And I gave you like 3 bites of the cherry. You could burn them all in 1 turn. You could burn it over subsequent turns, right? Alliance Banana Man saw a lot of play in just general Paladin decks like these pure Paladin decks. And obviously you don't get multiple uses of his effect, but 3 mana 2/2, draw a card and give everything +1/+1. Very similar to the Buzzard effect right now in Hunter. It just turns out that hits like the sweet spot for the 25th to the 30th card in your deck, right? So I can see there being some sort of hand buff Paladin deck. My slight issue with it again though is, would you run this as the token deck? Probably not. Would you run this in the aggro deck? Possibly not. It's more like a mid-rangey card where you just want to keep refilling your hand. And this is always the problem with hand buff decks. It's like, you're going to get value, sure, but it's long-term value. And can you stay alive until you see this dividends? And also, your opponent is still playing the game, right? You have to play cards to counter their cards, and you want to buff your cards, but you can't leave them in your hand. You get the deal. Just as another reminder, sorry, in case it wasn't very clear, you could conceivably leave a minion in your hand as well and give it +3/+3, right? Just keep swinging while it's in your hand. You don't have to just throw the card out there immediately, but you're probably going to need to, right? This is where I get a little bit... I can see why people get wound up a bit by the Paladin reveals. Tarim, the Legendary, obviously really bad in the deck with Painter's Virtue. You do not want to be buffing your Tarim, because he sets his attack and health... Sorry, he sets a minion's attack and health equal to his. So, obviously this won't be in your mid-range deck with Tarim. This has to be in another deck. So, will that deck come to fruition? I'm not sure. It has support, though, in Wind Up Enforcer. 6 mana, 3/5 tradable minion. Battlecry. Summon 1 copy of this minion. Trade to upgrade. Okay, there's something you have to be aware of this, and it's kind of a niche mechanic, or at least niche for a lot of people. I think a lot of people are aware that if you bounce a minion back from your field to your hand, and it had any stat buffs, you lose the buffs going to the hand, right? Similarly, if anything was buffed in your hand and goes back to your deck, it loses the buffs. Tradable doesn't do that. Tradable is its own unique thing, so if you buff this thing in your hand, and then trade it, it will keep the buffs going back into your deck. So I think this is the gimmick. The idea is that you paint your wind-up Enforcer for like 3 turns, and after 3 turns you trade it back into your deck so that you get 3 copies of it instead as a 6/8, and you're spending 6 mana for 18-24 of stats. That's really good! It's so slow! It's so slow! It's so slow! To be fair to this card at the very least, if you just play this out on the board, it's 6 mana for 6/10 stats, which is pretty good, honestly. That's fairly statted for something that has, like, effectively no other effect on top of it. But to get the full shebang from this, and I think this is going to be put into this mid-rangey, hand-buffy Paladin deck that doesn't include all of the mid-range options. Maybe it's just the finisher. Maybe that is it. Maybe you run this long-term Paladin deck to this value Paladin deck, and eventually you'll beat someone down with this wind-up Enforcer. You'll trade it back 3 or 4 times. And then you'll just fill your board up with wind-up Enforcers that are giga-buffed. Anyway, there are some cards in the standard set right now that could also help with painting the wind-up Enforcer. Grimes 3 Outfitter, I believe, is staying in the core set. Muscletron was added fairly recently. And we do have a mech aura, so maybe you make your mech aura last longer and you put mechs in the... I don't know. Probably not. But anyway, Muscletron is in the game. It sees no play competitively right now. But that gives you another buff option. And you can always Brewmaster and bounce one of these back. Now, I said tradable, doesn't work quite the same way. I believe if you bounce this and it's already received a buff, it will lose it that way, right? However, Brewmaster gives it +2/+2, and then you can trade that back again into the deck and keep the cycle, going even longer. I think this is a meme. I don't think this will see much play. Okay, of all the cards, I think Flash Shell is one of the ones that will definitely see some play. 4 mana, summon a 1/2 mech with Divine Shield and Taunt, give your minions +1/+2. This card is Pride's Fury and Annoyatron having a baby. It's not quite the same as Pride's Fury. Pride's Fury is 1/3, this is 1/2. But Pride's Fury used to see some play back in Nature Druid. Now, I believe at that point it gave 2/3, and once it got nerfed, it kind of fell off quite a lot. But at the very least, this is 1/2. Annoyatron is a 2 mana minion, so you're basically paying 2 mana to give your minions +1/+2. Is that good enough? Probably, is what I'm going to say. Now, there are spells out there that are 1 mana that say give your minions +1/+1, so you might argue that for 2 mana you should get +2/+2. It doesn't quite work that way, but I can definitely see a world where you have this token Paladin deck, you drop a Flash Sale on the board instead of trying to use the aura and making your minions attack, and instead you just get that buff up front, right, with the Flash Sale. So, other nice thing is Flash Sale gives you this very annoying to remove minion that kind of protects your other buffed minions. So if one of your buffed minions has like an effect on it that when you attack something good happens, like Lifesteal for example, it gets protected for a little bit longer thanks to the Annoyatron guy. Alright, what is going to tie all this together? It's Pipsy Paintu, 4 mana, 7 mana, 4/4, Death Rattle. Summon a random Divine Shield, Rush, and Taunt minion from your deck. Terrible. Absolutely awful. This card is going to see 0 play. And I'm going to tell you why. Again, it's always a cautionary tale of Death Rattle. It's just such a slow effect, right? You play this minion, you're like, haha, my opponent will trade with this, and I will get 3 minions! And obviously you can stack the deck in such a way that you will get as much value from these 3 minions as is humanly possible. You sit there and you're like, haha, and then your opponent doesn't kill it, and you're like, wait, my opponent didn't kill it. I spent 7 mana for a 4/4, which is like a 3 mana thing. I wasted 4 mana. That's fine, I'll just trade it into that. Oh, they didn't play any minions. It's fine, eventually we'll go, and it's just, it leads to this eventuality. Your opponent can have time to play around this. And then honestly, looking through Standard right now, what are the minions you're trying to tutor for? I've pulled out 4 here, and I think these are like some of the 4 best ones. In all seriousness, there's like 0 good rush minions. And I say this because, again, you don't really get to do something with the rush minion immediately. So you want a rush minion that will survive until your turn comes back around. And I think Evasive Worm, which is going to rotate back into the core set, is the best one of these. Obviously from the taunt side of things, getting something like Amatus, Tyrion would be a huge gain from this. And I definitely think Tyrion will see some play in this clearly mid-range Paladin deck, right? And again, for Divine Shield, you might want to get a Jitterbug, and if you stack your deck so that your Rush and Taunt minions also have Divine Shield, then you can start drawing off this as well. That seems pretty good. It's just so slow. It's so slow. It kind of reminds me of Kangor's Dancing Paladin, which is actually an archetype I did try to make work many a time off camera, and it was fun when it worked, but when it doesn't work, it is really not fun. You're just kind of like stalling the game out. Also, to get as much value from this as humanly possible, you're probably going to be incentivized not to run Divine Shield, Rush, and Taunt minions that are cheaper than, like, 4 mana, let's say, or 3 mana, I suppose, 3 or less. Which means you're going to have to build your deck very awkwardly in the early game. I don't see it. I simply do not see it. And also, again, let me just go back to this as my little skipping playlist. Hey, who has Taunt? Tarim has Taunt! Do you want to pull out Tarim with Pepsi? She's not called Pepsi, but I'm going to call her Pepsi. No, because it has a battle cry, and the battle cry is far more superior than the rest of the effect. So, yeah, it's really weird that they've shown Tarim off as like this mid-range control juggernaut, and then every other card that seems to be like mid-range value-orientated has anti-synergy with Tarim, so yeah, I simply, I just think it's all muddled, but I can definitely see bits and pieces of these Paladin cards going into their own archetypes. So yeah, my overview on Paladin reveals, do not expect to see a new deck just come out of nowhere, but do expect to see some of these cards slot into current archetypes, especially archetypes where they're losing some of their support, like the hand buff token Paladin, which is losing the garden, right, soon. So they're going to be looking for some more buffing answers. Anyway, thanks for watching. I believe it's Shaman tomorrow, so we'll see what direction I'm going to take Shaman in. Reminder for Shaman, this is my early preview, because clearly I was wrong on the 1 attack, 1 health minion fairy. Shaman is getting back the spell damage totem, so I think it's going to be some sort of spell damage overload Shaman. That is my prediction for tomorrow. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.